welcome to episode 39 of Hardcore Gaming 101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate. My name is Xerxes, and this podcast is a 95% accuracy, so we got things pretty much under control. Oh no. My panelists today are...
I'm Bob Nader.
I'm Carl.
I'm Satenga.
I'm Kurt.
On this podcast, we have 3 rules. Rule 1, all rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. Rule 2, you can nominate one game at a time via 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. We've stopped accepting nominations via Twitter for the time being. Rule number 3, you can nominate games that have already been nominated, just don't nominate games we've already ranked. You can see the master list for yourself. Check it out at bit.ly/47kgames. All right, next game we're talking about is XCOM UFO Defense or UFO Enemy Unknown. It was nominated by @EVKTalo on Twitter. It was developed by Mythos Games. It was published by Microprose Software for the PC. Earliest known release date is March 1994 in Europe. Who here has something to say about XCOM?
I know someone who does.
Cal, yeah.
I mean, I love XCOM. What a fantastic game. It's an alien invasion simulator where you play as a secret shadow organization protecting the Earth from the alien invaders. And that doesn't that concept just, no matter what time period, that's cool, right? You just like, that's a cool idea, you know, it's a cool game. It's going to be cool.
Unless you put it in the 1950s.
It's basically like Orson Welles' broadcast actually did happen, and now you have to deal with it.
But it's got like the big 90s shoulder pads and stuff. And
so much guile hair. It's good. It's good 90s comic art because it's just before Grimdark took over. You know, it's like it's just like loud and poppy. It's not quite garbage. Anyway, I don't know. I think most people have probably actually heard of XCOM at this point, since it had a very successful, very well-regarded reboot, relaunch recently with the XCOM Enemy Unknown and XCOM Enemy Within and XCOM 2. I don't know what the subtitle for the sequel was.
I think it's just 2. Plain old 2.
Oh, okay. I love non-numerical number systems that don't make any, like, you know,
yeah, I
sense.
mean,
okay.
The original series did get several sequels, but they didn't have any numbers. But we'll get to that later if we do.
If someone nominates them, which hopefully they won't, because they're not as good. Okay, so XCOM is a strategic game where you have a base that you put on a geoscape, which is a 3D representation of the Earth, and then you build a base full of the stuff that you would use to protect the Earth from aliens. And then you have a little radar system which detects aliens, and then you send out interceptor ships to stop aliens, and then you have a full tactical mode where you investigate alien ships, and later on you protect cities from aliens as well. And that's kind of, without going into the details of what the game is specifically, that's what you do. And it's a very, very large game, quite complicated, and with a lot of stuff to do. And it's pretty great. Did we say what year it came from? Because it's
yes, we did.
Pretty early on as far as games go, like, you know, early 90s. Really not actually that popular at the time. Didn't do that well in Europe. Did
in
really
America.
well in America. Yeah, it's weird.
PC Gamer was like all over this, and I remember it on the cover of one of those like kind of not that popular video game magazines, but you know they were all into this game.
Yeah, it's really cool. What I know a little bit of trivia for this. Basically, it didn't do all that well in Europe. Like, it was like people that played it liked it, but it wasn't popular. But then by the time it came out in the US, X-Files was out and really popular. And then
oh wow.
And by coincidence, XCOM was there, and it's like, hey, check it out, alien game. And people went nuts over the game because it was basically X-Files fever was at maximum peak, and XCOM was right there, and it was like, hey, we're like the game of that, but not.
Yeah,
I know it was also on the PS1. Did it do much better there?
I have no idea how the
imagine that it
PS1
did.
did.
It was
Probably
one of
low
the
times.
the early ones. Yeah, it was in those long boxes. I don't think so because I mean you would have to play with the controller and then deal with the memory card loading. Although they did do a port of the sequel, Tear from the Deep, that only came out in PAL territories.
Weird.
Which, as far as sequels go, is pretty. It's basically the exact same game with a palette swap.
It's way harder,
and
though,
it
right?
hates you. Yeah. Well, hates you more. I mean, it's
that... much harder. The aliens have a little bit more options to beat your ass, so it's not as fun. I think you can kill enemies by dumping them over the sea anymore, which was a big part of the first game to kind of stay alive. Yeah.
Unlike the X-Files, this game actually has a definitive ending to it, but it takes a while to get there. I mean, I almost want to say this is almost like a precursor or akin sort of to 4X type games, but not really. It's
not a precursor because it definitely came after like Civilization. But I was kind of thinking that myself before because it's a game where expanding is kind of like the point, but it's not. You're not on equal ground with the aliens. Like your opponent is on completely different because they're just popping up all over the place, and you have to knock them down. So it has that sort of sense, but not in the same way.
Yeah, it's kind of like you've got it in that it's an asymmetrical sort of game in that you are on your own home ground. We're on Earth, and the aliens are showing up in limited numbers, and they're way more powerful than you. So you basically are fighting them, stealing their technology, researching it, which is a really cool thematic part of the game. You know, you actually have to physically kill the aliens to get their technology, research it, and then you build like human equivalents of their weapons with their stolen like resources and stuff from ships that you've managed to destroy. Yeah, you're constantly playing chase up to the aliens. So whenever a new alien shows up, you know, there's ones that can float, ones that are, you know, made out of like flying discs and spinning things. You upgrade your human weapons to align with the new enemies that show up, which is like, that's cool.
Yeah, that's one of the key things about this game is that, like, you are always behind them. Like, the enemies they're not only more aggressive, but they always have better technology. And if you don't play catch up, then you're going to get, like, completely screwed and have to start the game over.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to talk about for just a little bit. This is not an easy game to get it into, and that's okay in part because of the theme. You're not meant to be really amazing, but it's like all your guys start as like these rookies who can't shoot for crap, and what you're mostly doing is trying to see how many survive the grinder to eventually get good enough to actually give the aliens a real fight, and that can take a while.
I do think that is part of the deliberate curve, though, the idea that, you know, you're sending these complete rookies out like, good luck, guys. There's a bunch of aliens out there. I hope you do okay.
If you try to do you can't do the Fire Emblem thing where, like, you can potentially keep everybody alive. No, that's stupid. Your soldiers will perish. You do have to accept a degree of death. Like, I don't know, maybe you can try and keep like one or two alive and they become the commanders or whatever, but
yeah, usually that's what I would do. As there'd be a couple people I just try to keep alive just because they've made it that far.
I mean, you can save scum to all ends of ages, but I tried that in one mission full of chrysalids, and I just had to accept biting a giant chunk of death on that one.
Yeah, there's never, I think, there's never a complete victory in this game.
True.
Like, you can do very well, but you'll just never do it perfectly. And that's what kind of, like, contrasts to the Japanese set of these type of games. Because, like, this is the first, like, strategy RPG game I had ever played back when I was, like, 12 or 13. Like, when I played Final Fantasy Tactics, I was like, okay, it's a combination of Final Fantasy and XCOM. But the fact that you can lose long-term is... Again, there's something closer to like the 4X part of it. Like, you really, I mean, unless you have a strategy guide, like, you have to like play and fail repeatedly to understand what you're supposed to do. And a lot of it is just like dumb mistakes. Like, I booted up for the first time and like I'd actually sit down and play it in probably like a decade or so. And of course, like I did pretty good on the first mission, but then I forgot to build a alien containment facility, so it died immediately.
Oh.
So there's just like lots of little stumbling blocks that you have to learn. Just for like simple little things.
What I like about a lot of that stuff is it makes sense. It's not like, oh, you didn't read the green thing. What? What was like, what? No, it's like, well, you want to keep an alien alive? You need an alien containment. That you know, it's like, oh, well, obviously you need an alien containment to keep an alien alive. You know,
basically read the manual or you're screwed.
I don't actually think this game demands that you read the manual because it's pretty good at telling you what's going on. Except, and this is probably the biggest thing, The strategic interface controls will take some learning. That's probably the hardest part about the game to get used to. The time unit system, when you're using the guys in the tactics and you have like a dozen different symbols that don't tell you really what they do. And
that was I for the first time I tried that Open XCOM patch, and one of the best things about it is that it actually highlights like what that button is, because it's like a button of a dude standing with an arrow, which it means like next unit, but without that context or having the manual next to you, which was sort of like, especially Microprose games, they had really thick manuals. Like the XCOM one wasn't that bad, but it definitely presupposed that you had it next to you, at least when you were starting to play the game.
Yeah, like I don't consider it a huge deal, because it's trying to make this game kind of intuitive and simple to play, especially once you've played it a little bit. Like you're like, oh yeah, no, the interface makes sense, and I really like some of the features. Like you have the ability to lock a turn unit, so that you can say, okay, I want to move, but don't let me move more than I can move and shoot, because I want to shoot after I move, so I don't care. And so it's got that option to move and shoot without accidentally, without having to time your own steps. It has that built in.
Oh, what the biggest things about that is, I don't know if this is the game that defined it, but the Overwatch, the idea that like you would set your character with enough units left so that if it saw an enemy, it would automatically shoot.
Yeah, which is a huge part of, kind of
yeah, you need to
game.
use this a lot, and I never saw too many Japanese games that used it up until I played like Valkyria Chronicles, like 15 years later.
Yeah, it wasn't popular, I think, but a lot of Japanese games, to be fair, they don't often do the bunch of dudes with guns, which makes it a lot harder to do a sort of Overwatch mode, whereas XCOM, everyone's got guns. And what I love about that is, you have like, 16 guys, whatever, you usually have less than that until later on in the game, but you'll march them all out, and then you actually have to sort of cover yourself. Like, you have to have them overwatching each other and keeping an eye on all of the potential areas of ingress. And usually that's your only advantage, is you actually outnumber the aliens, especially early on, where, you're only dealing with like 3 or 4, maybe 5 sectoids. So you actually have the ability to take them out, like one by one, sort of pick them off, even if your guys are not great at shooting. But it also made the game terrifying to play, because, if you're playing, especially if you everyone regrets doing this, but if you engage in the aliens at night and you can barely see anything, and your guys are walking through, like it's so thematic. Is like, if you're walking through cornfields, and then there's an alien who's set to Overwatch, and you're just walking, and then you just hear this like snap, and then the alien plasma rifle goes off, and you're just like, oh shit, and bam, your rookie just
You really do have to be kind of paranoid, because the enemies typically can shoot way better than you can. Like, I've had times I just walk off the ship you start on, and just there's a shot, and the guy is just dead.
Yeah.
So you have to be really, really careful where you're going, and make sure you do not waste any movement.
Yeah.
One of those rookie mistakes is when like you don't take all of your guys off the ship at the beginning, and then some alien chucks a grenade in and just blows them all away immediately.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
Man. Yep.
There really is a good deal to learn with this game, but you still have to accept veritable probability of failure nonetheless. I mean, this game's really infamous for, like, having an alien basically dead to rights, point blank, and you could still miss a goddamn pistol shot somehow.
The pistol's not super accurate. As far as the guns go.
Yeah, you'll definitely want to upgrade to rifles and cannons later on as you get them. But while this game is still pretty harsh, I want to say, in comparison to other games of this make, it's still kind of forgiving. I mean, like, what else can we compare it to that's even harder than this?
Well, I do like to think of this game, at least partially, as a roguelike. To say in terms of difficulty. Because it has that element of, because there's a lot of randomness in this game, especially, the areas are randomly generated, where the aliens come from is randomly generated, like they'll just appear in different areas. It doesn't, every time it's different. Where the Terra missions start, it's different. You don't know. So there's always this element of, I don't know what's going on, but you do get the tech tree remains the same, it remains static. But it does have this ability to tell an organic story around a linear framework, which I think is really cool.
We got to rank this thing pretty soon. But before we do, I wondered if anybody could talk a little bit more about like the weird sort of like economic part of it, where like you have to get funding.
Yeah, I was about to mention that your greatest enemy isn't so much the aliens as it is money. And not just money and bureaucracy, as a matter of fact.
Real quick, like, your biggest problem in this game is you kind of have a downward spiral going on. Like, your thing is you have to protect all the countries of the world from alien attack, and if you can't do that, they don't trust you anymore, and they start giving you money, which means you're just going to be worse at protecting everybody else, so they start giving you money, and it just kind of builds up, is the problem.
Yeah,
which is great. I love that. It's such a human thing to do.
So crazy, though. It's like you're mankind's last hope. Earth is being invaded by a much more powerful force of aliens, and if you mess up, people are like, I don't know, maybe we should just like stop giving them money and just like give up.
Yeah,
no, you give them more money. If they start losing, you really
no. I think the idea is that they abandoned the XCOM project and are like, no, we're just going to invest in our own military. They'll deal with it, rather than give money to you. I think is the sort of the context of it.
I'm just wondering why the concept of an economy matters when the actual apocalypse is at stake.
I don't want to get political on you here.
Oh,
but
Jesus!
We have a
please don't.
No, I'm not going to go political. Just humans have a really bad history of being like, serious problem, cost money. I don't think so.
Think of any RPG where you're going to face the end of the world and people are still charging you money for anything.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bring up TV tropes, but I think the colloquialism for this is Adam Smith hates your guts.
And plus you're talking about people's taxes, basically, so you know how people are with tax dollars.
They might be like, I don't know, maybe the alien taxes will be lower, so we should take a chance on that.
Yeah, I guess compared to like Final Fantasy VII's last disc, where the meteor is hanging in the sky perpetually, and you still have to, pay this much for the gold saucer or whatever. I guess XCOM at least does a better job of justifying the catch of budget. But still,
wouldn't it be an interesting difficulty, like ameliorating mechanism if you did like get like by losing, you would get like a brief funding boost by people like, oh crap, like we're gonna lose everything, like we better give them a little bit of extra cash.
I'm glad you sort of
kind of help
that.
You climb back up a little bit,
because I can bring up there was an early mechanism in this game which led to one of the infamous DOS bugs, or the main infamous DOS bug. This game has a bug where if you play the game, the original very DOS version, what'll happen is after the first fight, it'll automatically go back to easy mode. No matter what you picked, it'll bounce back to easy mode. And the thing is, originally the game was going to have a dynamic difficulty. So after fights and things, it was going to look at it and go, okay, you didn't do well, so we're going to make the game easier. You did well, so we're going to make the game harder. So there was kind of an intent, actually, to do a very similar system to that, where it was actually going to try and make it a little bit less crushing when you were doing badly. They stripped it out and didn't end up going with it. But there's a little tidbit.
I remember this because people were complaining about how UFO defense was easy, so as a result, they made it just the base difficulty in Terror from the Deep ungodly excruciating, and then anything above that is impossible to super impossible. So fantastic! That's
does OpenXCom fix that issue? Because I think that's the best way to play this game.
There's an option for it.
There's fan patches. OpenXCom, I presume, fixes it. Most of the later releases fix it. It's only the original DOS version, and I believe for ages the Steam version and maybe the GOG version, because they were just emulated original DOS releases, had that issue. But
I just read about that for the first time when I booted up the OpenXCom, and the version I played was actually like the European version on CD because I had bought it at a computer show, which is where I got all my old games back then. And I still remember it being excruciatingly hard.
Yeah,
so that must have been a later version.
The version that they had actually fixed.
Yeah.
Because I think they did fix later releases because someone pointed it out. On the subject of the money, though, you can also sell your alien equipment and stuff on the black market, which is really fun. The idea that it's just Well, we're not being funded by the government, so let's sell extremely dangerous alien weaponry to just random people on the black market, because that'll go well.
Surely there's some, like, narco gangs out there that want some of these plasma rifles or whatever.
That's basically what I did to shore up my cash early on in the game, because, you don't need that many laser pistols. Just pawn it off.
Yeah, this can't possibly backfire. All right, where do we want to rank this? Where do we want to rank it?
Well, it's already been sort of made aware before this where I want to rank it, which is I really want this game to go very, 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 very high. But I don't know about everyone else, even though it seems like everyone here at least likes the game, I think.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think it is really a fantastic game, but you were pushing for number one. I don't know about
I don't know about that either.
Number one.
I certainly don't hate it.
I like the game, but I feel like it does get kind of tedious.
I do have to admit, late in the game, I actually did beat this one. Late in where I felt that just battling would have been a time waster while waiting for research for my final spaceship. I literally just kept skipping time ahead. And, England severed its funding with me, but I still managed to go to space and destroy the final mission, so... But yeah, there is a certain repetition that comes in, it is hard, but after you step over that learning curve and you know more or less what to do, then, it just sort of regulates. I mean, it's still enjoyable, but, once you just basically have everything set in place, it's only a matter of time and money until you do get everything you need.
Right. I mean, the reason why I say this is just that, in other pure 4X game, right, the gameplay always gets different as you go on. The obstacles are different. Different things can start to happen. Usually there's, one other super powerful force out there that you have to kind of start worrying about. And, you know what I mean? Whereas this game, maybe I'm wrong, but as I recall, when we played it for the previous version of the podcast, I felt like it kind of didn't really, it just got harder and bigger, but not really, it was cool to see.
There's quite a curve of enemies that will show up as the game progresses. You don't start at maximum tier enemies. You start with the little sectoids. You start to get mutants or whatever. You get crystallids who just wreck everyone's day, and everyone's terrified of them pretty much constantly.
And then you get different weapons, like the psychic stuff.
Yeah, you get different weapons, which is really cool. You actually start, the aliens have the ability to mind control you. I always forget the name, but
the Ethereals. The Ethereals. Those guys are cheaters.
Yes. They're not actually ethereal, but they're called Ethereals, so I don't know.
Well, the Chrysalids and the Ethereals are gigantic jerks. I forgot to mention that earlier, but...
Okay.
Yeah, so they can actually mind control your guys, and your guys can actually panic, which is really cool. I don't know if this is one of the first games where your soldiers actually can freak out. If they see a person die, they're like, oh god, everything's going to hell, and their morale will actually collapse, and then they'll just go crazy, which is...
Yeah, I feel like there were some other games around this time, but I don't know of any that I definitely predate XCOM.
Really quickly at the Laser Squad and all the other Julian Gollop games before this, it looked like there was a morale meter, so I'm assuming.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised since Julian Gollop brought a lot of the game that he was previously making, because this was actually going to be Laser Squad 2 until it was sort of rejiggered into ultimately what it was.
The biggest thing XCOM has over Laser Squad is the idea of progression and the global map and having to slowly build yourself up instead of just being stuck in single missions.
Which I think is a really key part to this game. Like so many other games, a single mission based, and before and after. And XCOM, and this is one of the reasons I think it's so great, is it has this massive overarching strategic thing, and it has individual tactical levels, and it has, base building, economic systems, and it fits, you have every single bit, and you put them together, and it's like, that actually works. You don't go, this bit's unnecessary or that bit's crap. No, it's like, actually, every bit here comes together really well, and you make smart choices in one map, and that will influence your other map. If you sell off your weapons to keep the project going, you're going to have less equipment later. Maybe that'll screw you then. If you decide not to do a terror mission because you can't, you're like, whoa, I don't want to lose all my guys. So then they'll leave the XCOM project. If you shoot an alien mothership or an alien ship down over the ocean, it just disappears. So you can strategically think about whether you down a ship over land or in the ocean. How you lay out your base comes back to bite you in the ass as the game progresses. Like, even all this stuff comes together. And why I think that it's such a phenomenal game, and compared to especially games on the list, a lot of these games, and we have them, where they're like, yeah, it's a simple idea done really well. And it's like, cool, it is. This game is a complex idea done really well. And it can have like little rough edges and things in places, but it's really, really, really hard to make a game this functional and this expansive. My evidence for that is you can look at games after XCOM and you can probably pull maybe half a dozen that do XCOM as well as XCOM from when this game came out to today. There's very, very few games that can handle that many systems at once.
So what you're saying is, like, in the you're putting it in the Donkey Kong Country 3 range? Is that what we're?
I actually thought it was a little better than Donkey Kong Country 3 because that's a third sequel to two superior games.
Let's not be hyperbolic here. I know Cal definitely wants to rate it high. I think it should
you guys
go
don't have
very
to rate
high,
it high on my account, but I
no,
think
we definitely won't.
Game.
Don't worry about that.
I'm thinking somewhere in FTL. What do you guys think?
That sounds fair. I would have put it a little bit higher than that. Like I would put.
I mean, I've never played FTL, but I mean, I would definitely put this in like top 12.
You've got to play FTL.
FTL is actually worth playing.
Actually, it's a pretty comparable game in a lot of ways. Of just like the amount of stuff that you can do.
And that's
much more streamlined.
That was a little something that I wanted to talk about. I'll only say it for a few seconds, but just XCOM is one of those games that I think really subtly influenced a hell of a lot of gamers and a hell of a lot of developers because it regularly shows up on like indie developers like top lists and like game reviewers top lists. This game is always there, XCOM sitting in there like, oh, XCOM was so good. And it's kind of like XCOM and Star Control 2, these kind of games where it's just like those games were just so great on the PC. These were the columns, the pillars of like, this is what PC gaming can do. This is what, if you got a PC, this is the game you're after, this is the peak of games that can be like very system mechanics, tactics heavy. And it's not like an arcade game.
We really got to wrap this up. So let me just point something out here. Like pretty much wherever we put this, if it's in the top 15 or more, or actually even in the top 20, it would be the most complicated game. There's no game that's this complex that's anywhere near.
The only game on our list that I think comes close so far at a high level is Devil May Cry because it has a lot of complicated.
I was going to say more like Metal Gear Solid.
Interesting.
Metal Gear Solid's not that complicated. To me, I wouldn't call it complicated. I would just call it like a very
it's got a lot of shit going on,
highly produced game, but it's not super complicated. I mean, you're not doing anything that different by the end of the game than what you started out doing. Devil May Cry is maybe a better comparison, but still, that's not. I think this like XCOM is just worlds away in terms of just how much stuff is happening.
So, do you want to place it between Lode Runner and Devil May Cry then?
I'm not saying that that's like a reason to rank it high or low. I'm just saying that pretty much wherever you put it, it's like it's going to be the most complex game. And one of my personal criteria for rank, like there are a lot of games that I really like that are so complicated I don't even feel like I fully understand them, and I'm hesitant to rank them all that highly. This is one of them, and I kind of I'm kind of partial to simpler, more elegant things, and this is definitely the opposite of that.
True.
But I don't dislike. That's just my personal opinion. I think from I would put it somewhere around.
I think especially at another point, as I did say there's a new XCOM, and in a lot of ways the new XCOM, very, very little difference between it and the original game. Like you're talking a game that was made like 2 decades plus ago, and you're like, okay, well, we just took it and we gave it a new coat of paint and added some stuff.
So I can live with below Lode Runner, above Devil May Cry. Anybody else?
That works for me.
I would stick it above Lode Runner, but that's about it.
Lode Runner.
Yes, above Lode Runner.
Uh-oh. Well, I'm okay with
coughing.
I'm okay with whatever. I'll provide the tiebreaker, but between MGS and LRO, as it were, what does anyone say?
That's not a tiebreaker. That's a tie maker.
No. I mean,
If he goes up above Lode Runner, then it's three for above Lode Runner.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm suggesting. I don't know which one I want to go for. I want to hear what everyone else thinks about placing it below Metal Gear Solid.
Look, I'm willing to say, like, it's not, even though I think it's subtly influenced a lot, I don't think it's a game that defined gaming as a whole. It's just a really, really damn good game that influenced a lot of developers to get into developing. And it is timeless, I think. It's a fantastic game.
So the last thing I could say about it is that they tried to do so many sequels to this game, and none of them really came close to it until the reboot, which was almost 20 years later.
All right. So between Lode Runner and DMC, then?
All right.
No, between Metal Gear Solid and Lode Runner, right?
Yeah. Agreed.
So where are we placing it? You guys are confusing me.
Between Metal Gear and Lode Runner.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay,
Go on the list. You can't stop me now.
It gets bumped up one. All right, fair enough. XCOM UFO Defense is our 7th greatest game of all time. I'll be damned.
Okay, our next game is Mystery Dungeon Shiren the Wanderer, which was nominated by Fallopian Groove on iTunes and Gadzuki on Stitcher.
Nice.
Fallopian Groove is, that's pretty good.
You hear that name, you're like, oh, I really wish I had taken that name.
Yeah, Bonus Lizard was another hit. Lord of
that
Butt,
was so
I believe,
good, and
was
it's
pretty
just
good.
like,
yeah.
Damn. Well, looks like I'm stuck with my crappy
Fallopian
name.
Groove, yeah. Okay, so Shiren the Wanderer, developed by Chunsoft, published by Sega for the Nintendo DS. There was also, of course, the original version of this one was on the Super Famicom. Earliest release date and territory for the DS version is December 14th, 2006 in Japan. And so we are definitely ranking the DS version, right?
It's
the version that came out in English.
They're not particularly different anyway. I don't even think you get into fisticuffs over this. They're pretty similar.
Yeah, okay. But, the DS version does have the map, which is always a very helpful bonus for complicated games such as these. And, if we can call this one complicated, or is it just plain mean? I don't know.
Well,
it's a little bit of both.
Let's describe what it is first for the people. Not everybody is super familiar with Shiren the Wanderer. Go ahead.
Shiren the Wanderer is a remake of a Super Famicom game. I forget the exact year it came out, but this is, as said, the first time.
I believe it was 95 from what I checked.
Okay. Like I said, this is the first time it's been out in the US in English. And it is a roguelike. It is more on the Japanese style, which are subtly different in a few ways we'll get into.
Yeah. The most important thing you could say about Shiren and its type is that not this game specifically, but it created this whole subgenre of Japanese roguelikes. It's and it's sort of all tied together. Like Yuji Horii in all of his games he was such a huge influence specifically on the adventure and RPG stuff. Like these genres existed in Japan, but he took his old text-adventure game Portopia and ported it to the Famicom, and it was so tremendously popular that almost every Japanese adventure game it has roots lies in that game. And the same thing happened with Dragon Quest, and so many of his Japanese RPGs still back from there. Well, this game was, I don't know how much he was done with this specifically, but the first game in the series was it featured Torneko from Dragon Quest IV. And the whole idea was that it was sort of taking the idea of rogue and making it palatable for a console audience. And it wasn't the first rogue-like game that had come out. Like, Konami put out that game Cave Noir, and Sega put out Fatal Labyrinth and Dragon Crystal, and I'm pretty sure those.
If there's any game Shiren reminds me of, it's Fatal Labyrinth.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, but Torneko no Daiboken, I think it was called. That was the first game that started this whole Mystery Dungeon series, and there's been tons and tons of Mystery Dungeon games, and a lot of the other Japanese roguelikes owe itself to Mystery Dungeon.
Yeah, you can find this is one of those things where if you go to Japan and just comb through like, the used bookstore like Book Off or something and just look for old games, you'll see a ton of these Mystery Dungeon games, and that gives you an idea of how far its reach actually was over there. You always know, like, it's like when something is rivaling baseball games in terms of like shelf space, then you know that you've got a hit.
And it's funny that like none of them, like, there's just something that was too obscure to ever bother to come over here. They brought out a couple in America in the PlayStation era, like that Konami game Azure Dream came out here, which had this like dating element. That was the first game that I had ever played that was like that. And when NX was still around, they brought out the Torneko sequel for the PS1, which just got torn apart in the reviews because nobody understood how to play it. Like, it was, it had its roots in a game that was very popular over there, but over here, it just didn't have the culture that was brought up. And the same thing, I think, happened to Shiren to an extent, but not as badly, because it is still, there was still a, what do you call it? It had notoriety amongst forum goers.
Well, part of Shiren was that it was piggybacking outside of Japan on Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, which is basically a much lighter, much friendlier, much more approachable game in the genre. And so with Shiren, they thought, cool, they love Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. They're ready. They're ready for Shiren. Here it comes. And they weren't. And nobody is.
Well, it was done by Sega. It was published by Sega, too. I don't know how they did it in Japan. But yeah, like the Mystery Dungeon is big letters on the packaging, Shiren the Wanderer in text beneath it. And right in the back, it says something like, if you like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, you will love this.
Can I also point out that the box art for, outside of Japan is abysmal? Like, come on, they paid nothing for that. Like, the Japanese release has gorgeous painted watercolors. It really makes you think, hey, I want to play this. But the American box art is just abysmal. I'm sorry to the artist who made it, but I'm not impressed by it.
It's very 90s American box art of a Japanese game, I'd say. Maybe not as bad as, like, I don't know, Suikoden, but kind of up there.
It's a shame because the game was, I think, really well done. Like, the way they did a good job localizing it, I thought. I mean, there's not a lot to do, but it makes sense. It's not like games like this have a tendency, especially like the Japanese terms used don't always make a lot of sense if you kind of translate them directly or just like turn them back into whatever they were supposed to be in English.
Yeah,
it doesn't always make sense. But
for a game that keeps stabbing you in the throat, this is a decent translation. But oh boy, I don't want to say Shiren is at all bad, but it really requires a specific type of mindset.
So can somebody describe kind of like, I think rather than just straight up describing what the gameplay is, just like describe it like, what is the workflow for this game? Like you're at any given point, what are you going to do when you pick up the game and start playing it?
It's turn-based combat for the most part. You wander around a dungeon, and then when you move,
you start out in a town or a part of a town, right?
You do. All right. So you have a story, and the story is you want to get to a golden city full of money or something. That's Shiren's quest. He's in a town. You can buy things in a town usually, but it's not always helpful stuff. You can rent people to follow you around. And there's a couple other things that you can do there, but we can talk about that in a sec. And then after you're in the town, you then go to a dungeon. And because it's a roguelike, you're actually playing the dungeons. They're all randomized, and you basically just play them one after the other, and there's towns in between the dungeons. And so you do a one-shot attempt. If you die, you go back to the very start.
One thing that separates from most other roguelikes is that dying is not like an immediate end to everything. You just go send back to town, and there is a certain place in town you can place things. So your kind of goal is to get things and put them into your warehouse. You can bring them back with you and just slowly build up a supply of things you can use for future runs.
But if you die, what you have on you, you lose that stuff, right?
That's all going away unless you use the DS version special feature, which no longer works because the internet's turned off on the DS. But
you have like a buddy go get it for you.
Basically, yes. You can go, please help me, and someone can play their own game in a very convoluted fashion. They actually have to go back to the starting town, which means they have to refight through all of the areas they've been through, re-randomized. And then they have to start from the town. Then they can choose the rescue option in that town. And then they can fight to where you were, find your corpse, wake you up, and then you can continue your game. And in return for that, the person who's trying to help you, helping people will get you a special can get you special items that you can't get outside of helping people, so you can't get those anymore. And the person who you rescue can actually send you stuff. So that is an alternate way to get things. Is if someone's really grateful that you saved their run, they can send you a good item or two, which is it's nice as a feature, but that's it. Otherwise, you're dead. Dead. No re.
Now, the way this game works, imagine that like somebody went through all that effort to resurrect you, and then 5 seconds later, you just got slaughtered again.
Which does not sound unusual.
You take like 3 steps, and then you get caught in a bear trap, and an enemy just kills you. And that's the game.
So, yeah, I mean, this is like, unlike an actual game of Rogue or NetHack or whatever, like you do have, there is, you know, you're constantly backtracking to get back to town and like put away your stuff and kind of
I mean, it's been a while since I played, but isn't it like every couple levels is that the way you can drop off your stuff? Like you can't go backwards, right?
I believe you can go backwards, but you have to basically, when you go backwards, it just remakes the dungeon. So basically to go backwards, you have to go through dungeons that are re-randomized again in order to go backwards. So you don't
Is that right?
generally want to do that.
Yeah, I've tested that. It does make an entirely new level.
So basically if you get far enough in the game and you're like, wow, this sword's really amazing, it's so good, but I don't think I'm going to beat the game this time, you can dump it in a storehouse, and then when you get back to that point on another run, you can retrieve that sword and be like, cool, now I got the sword, and I have the shields or whatever, the pants that also will now make me strong enough that I can actually maybe finish the game. And that's actually one of my chief complaints about this. This is a roguelike where instead of scrapping after each playthrough, you're basically encouraged to grind through the game, get some good items, store the good items, repeat, until you feel like you've got the necessary items to be like, all right, now I can make that one run that might finish the game. And I love roguelikes, but I don't like the introduction of some pretty heavy grinding that also you could just maybe get completely killed anyway and then lose, 10 hours of grinding and just like, wow.
Don't some people actually like grinding? And if so, would you recommend this game for them?
I like grinding only if it's fun grinding, like in an East game or something where the combat feels really satisfying.
Yeah.
Like if I'm just tired and like I just want to slice up something for half an hour and watch my numbers go up, it's fine, great. But Shiren doesn't have that sort of satisfying combat in that way. Like it's just kind of like a time waster. And again, anyway, like you could just screw it all up and then all your effort's just gone.
I'd like to speak for a little bit about some, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like this game is just really fundamentally dull for a roguelike. Like, mostly I'm comparing it to something like, say, NetHack or Ancient Domains of Mystery, where, like, you have a lot of items that do different things, and part of the challenge is figure out how they interact and how to use them most effectively. This game doesn't really do that. You're just kind of wandering around a maze, just killing everything you see, and that's pretty much all there is to it.
Now, when this game came out for the DS, there's either like the Game Spider or the Select Button forums, and there's a community on there that loved it, not because they necessarily played to win, but because they just, like, since everything is randomized, each run was like its own story. So what ridiculous ways that you were able to end up getting killed, that was why you played the game. And then you shared them with other people on the forums, and they're like, oh, okay, that's kind of fun. That's amusing. And I had a lot more fun reading about other people's experiences than I ever really did have playing this game.
See, part of my wondering is, okay, so this is, on the DS, this is a pretty decent roguelike. I'm going to put that out there because there's not a huge selection of good roguelikes on the DS. You know, even though it should have had some plenty good roguelikes. It's, you know, you got like the Unemployed Ninja games, which are not particularly good. So if you want like a proper difficult roguelike, this is one of your few solid options.
You know, we do have the Pokemon Mystery Dungeons, which are kind of the successor to this formula. But
it's interesting because there's successes, but also not, because in the US they came out before. It's a little bit crazy,
it's kind of a weird game perspective.
There were later Shiren games that, like, there's one that came out in the Wii. I think that one flopped because nobody cared. Then there's one that came out for the Vita last year, which people assure me is good, but I haven't opened it yet.
They assured me this one was good.
Wink, wink, wink.
But what happens with this one, I think, is, you know, but most roguelikes have that capacity for story. You know, even the original Rogue has that, you know, that sort of organic means that the game comes together. So you're like, I was exploring and then I got murdered. And, you know, there's huge communities for, you know, Adam and NetHack, and let's rank the game low.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to rank the game that low. I mean, what I'll say is, like, it is looking at this game, like, its success as a game is kind of one thing. Its success is what it was trying to do is another. And I think, like, doing what it's trying to do, I think it's a pretty good pared down kind of roguelike experience. It is pretty hardcore, but it's not inaccessible to newcomers in a way that, like, say, NetHack would be, which is a infinitely more complicated and probably better game. But it's like, how do you get somebody into that? It's like, I've got a game you've got to play. NetHack, check it out.
I've got it. You know, it's like, hey, do you like ASCII?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, like, a roguelike like this, like, I think lives or dies on, as you said, like, the weird, like, stories you can tell, like, what kind of crazy crap can happen to you. And, like, you know, the fun of, like, the possibility and the fun of just finding something crazy that you weren't expecting to find. You know, whether it's like a weapon that's, like, way too powerful or something that you weren't supposed to have, and that kind of thing. Is kind of what makes these games fun.
Do that. It's just combat, pretty much nothing else.
It is definitely sort of a sort of shortened experience compared to some of these games. It's easy to get into because there's less going on. And I don't, as far as roguelikes go, I think that's a weakness. As far as kind of just play it, it's on the DS and it's pretty fun for just hanging out and playing.
I mean, ideally the game would just keep getting, like, more and more. It would add to itself in depth as you play it. Like, ideally it would be easy to get into, and then it gets more complicated and it grows on itself in a way that, but you know, that's, I would say
I think that's sort of a design flaw of how this one is built around its sort of circular system of getting items and then replaying and getting items. I think that it's kind of a little bit samey because it's like, yeah, but the whole point is you're supposed to go through it over and over and get the extra stuff. And I don't love the graphics in this. I know we haven't really talked about them. They're kind of the most sort of normal, good-looking SNES graphics, because obviously it was on the SNES. It's just like, yeah, this looks fine. The dungeons are okay, because they're very big open areas, the dungeons, as most roguelikes often are. And when you look at me like, that's okay. At least that's how I feel about these ones. I don't know if you guys like the graphics, but I'm not enamored with them.
It's fine. The music, I think, is worth talking about because it was done by Koichi Sugiyama, the Dragon Quest guy. So the music is kind of similar, and but it has, like, a Japanese style to it, and it's pretty well done.
The Japanese, the music's definitely nicely themed. The game is not fantasy themed as much as it is fantasy Japan themed, and it does have some nice sort of actual Japanese sounding like instrumentation. So I definitely give the music at least a decent props.
Can I give my pitch here?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Between Shadow Man and Donkey Kong Country 3.
Oh, Donkey Kong Country 3.
Is that just going to be a running gag that we keep mentioning DKC3 for Hazel?
What, you want us to talk about UN Squadron again? Because I'm happy to talk about UN Squadron.
Okay, point rescinded. Look, I don't have a lot to say about Shiren, to be honest. I didn't get that far in it, and I respect what it did for roguelikes, but I just really wasn't able to get into it, so I don't really have much opinion. I could just say, screw traps. There's too many of them in everything that plays like this.
So, as we've been, like, hinting at, this one is... It's like... It's got, like, a Japanese palette to it. I'm sure that if you have that sort of background in games, you'd be like, yeah, Shiren, you know, the Mystery Dungeon games, they're great. They're really fun. But it really doesn't... As someone who sort of grew up on Western games and Japanese games, and as far as roguelikes go, I basically only play Western roguelikes. I just... Compared to Japanese roguelikes, I don't like Japanese roguelikes. I love Western ones, don't like Japanese ones. So it's really hard for me to sort of like this game when it's like, oh, everything about this isn't what I look for in a roguelike and not really what I look for in an RPG, because it doesn't have the, you know, JRPGs often have bizarre, elaborate stories that are kind of nonsense, but at least they're fun. And because this game doesn't have that either.
All right. Okay. That's a little harsh.
I say it's just a game out of time. Like, we didn't get it till we had the remake.
Right.
I think a lot of console gamers didn't really understand roguelike anything up until relatively recently. Like, my perception is that the game that really broke through roguelikes was either FTL or Spelunky, and that's a game that so many of the other roguelikes trace back to those. So that didn't happen for us until relatively recently. So this game came out in 2006. If it had come out in 1995, I think we'd feel a lot differently.
I bet it would be a cult favorite.
Yeah.
Super NES game. So,
I think it is a cult favorite, even because like the DS version, I think did have a cult favorite. I've seen lots of people.
Yeah, it definitely did.
Because when I played it, I mean, when I finally played it for the DS, I just approached it as a Super Nintendo game. That's how it felt to me. But I don't know. I'm thinking like it's got to be better than Shadow Man. It's like I'm never gonna touch Shadow Man again as long as I live. Like I could theoretically go back to Shiren. Like I do always feel like there might be some. Maybe this is just part of the curse. Is like I always feel like maybe there's something I'm missing. I got to go back.
I assumed I was missing something every time I've played this game because I'm like I love roguelikes. I'm pretty fine playing Japanese RPGs. I like all these things. Right. Why is this game like? Why am I like, ooh, I wish I was playing Towers of Jiraga? No, I don't. Just come on, get it together.
Well, I mean, okay, look. How about above Pulse Man, below Famicom Maze of Gallius?
All right.
I have no issues. The only thing we got is like, this obviously was very popular in Japan and it has been influential in Japan. So for our criteria of like, was it influential? Yes.
It's not, and it's not unplayable. Just because we don't like it doesn't mean it's unplayably bad. You know, it's just like, it's just not.
I don't think it's unplayably bad. I think you have to be of a specific, you got to just be looking for this specific kind of game and you'll probably love it. But if you're not, it's really incompatible.
Also, I think what Kurt was saying at the very beginning, just hats off to Yuji Horii for like picking finding a genre like a very computer-based genre and coming up with a way to consoleize it.
I do think that that releasing this on SNES was kind of like, that's really cool. You know, I like that. Because if you look at, we mentioned Fatal Labyrinth, and we did briefly mention it. That does feel, I don't want to say it's a lesser experience, but it's a more concentrated, just sort of, you go up the dungeon and then you die. And you go up the dungeon and then you die. Like, it's a very more traditional rogue. It doesn't add anything. This game does try to add things. I know it's got the loop. You can hire NPCs to do stuff for you. It has these like little elements that try and push it further.
The weird characters you find in the maze sometimes and stuff like that. Okay. All right.
Well-
All right. So is that good then? Right above Pulse Man?
Well, I admit
fine.
I was going to lowball it a bit more, but since I think I played this one the least savvy, I'm just going to surrender my opinion and go with whatever. So
Yay, we're done. There it goes. So right below Majo Densetsu 2, Daimashikyo Gallius, right above Pulse Man.
okay then.
That's not bad. Shiren the Wanderer.
Yeah.
A giant wicker hats off to you, my friend.
Really, this game, play it if you might like it. That's all I can say. You
might like it. If this is your jam, then you're really gonna like this. If not, don't give up on roguelikes altogether. There's other stuff out there.
Yeah, there's so many other roguelikes you can and really should be playing that.
But
do
you
so
couldn't
much
play them
better
in
than this.
'95.
We'll discuss it when they get nominated. That's all for this episode of Hardcore Gaming 101's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to at EVK Talo and Fallopian Groove on iTunes and Gadzuki on Stitcher. Thanks as well to those of you who haven't gotten to yet. We will be getting to you soon. And thanks to my lovely co-hosts and compatriots, and to our editor, Jeff Rude, our theme song composer, Miteki, our technical assistant and video editor, Bobinator, and of course, the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HG101. I know I did. You can also help us out by subscribing to the HG101 YouTube channel and checking out all our videos. And you can help us out by following at HG_101 and at GCINX on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the podcasting firmament by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HG101, and giving us a 5-star review. Do it, or we'll have to fight these aliens with rubber bands, a stern talking to, and a concerningly sticky pair of Hulk hands. It's like an elocution exercise right there. Until next week, keep keeping it real.